Welcome to Carpet Talk, a safe place where we process and discuss walking with Jesus. Join us on the carpet.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Carpet Talk. Today we have a very special guest, someone I'm really excited about hearing, my life and leadership teacher, Dr. Bruce Reese.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Hello.
Can you give us a little introduction to who you are and what you do at Concordia?
Definitely. My name is Dr. Bruce Reese. I'm the director of our criminal justice and criminology major. I'm the co-director of our sociology major with Dr. Ann Schwartz. I'm the head of our IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board. So any research that's done on campus has to come through the Institutional Review Board. We review it and submit it back out to students. And then I'm an assistant coach for the women's basketball team.
Awesome.
Wow.
Man, does almost everything.
I try to spread myself around a little bit where I'm needed.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Love that. So you talked about how you're in criminal justice. How did you get into that? What led you into that field? And also, like, for those that don't know what that is, like, what does that include?
Yeah, good. Good question. So my PhD is in sociology. And within my PhD studies, I had two concentrations, one being social psychology, which I teach from the sociological perspective, and then the other was criminology, which I teach from also the sociological perspective, but focusing on crime. So when I took the role of director of criminal justice and criminology here at Concordia, I was really coming at it from a theoretical perspective. I focus a lot on theory, a lot of research, and then the criminal justice side of the major, I've been tasked with finding specialists, the best of the best in the area that work on and focus on the different areas. So we have a great professor, Dr. Chris Schaefer, who is our Homeland Security professor. So he works for the Department of Homeland Security. He teaches all of our Roots of Terrorism class, Homeland Security classes. But then we have other professors who focus on things like forensics and crime scene analysis. So criminal justice is really broad, and I really focus on the theoretical aspect. And then I have hired experts to kind of focus on the more practical, hands-on things that students are going to learn from and use in their careers going on further on in life. So yeah, I got into the criminal justice major in criminology really through social psychology and what drives people's behaviors and actions to do certain things. And one of those things are crime.
Yeah. That's
interesting.
awesome.
That is pretty cool. So I'm just curious, what's a major thing that you've learned so far studying that, especially with the psychology thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. One thing that we had kind of talked about before we started is that law and crime are socially constructed, which essentially is really important to understand that the whole world around us is socially constructed, but crimes and laws are specifically socially constructed to socially control us. So, for example, speed limit, right? It's 65 to control how fast we go. But that varies, right? I'm from New York. In New York, going 65 is the speed limit. Moving down here in Texas, there's 85 where you can go, right? Can be constructed differently and changed
very
place
true.
to place from time to time.
Yeah.
So again, that was something that I really am adamant about in my classes, is getting across and talking about with students. And the benefit of being at a place like Concordia is I oftentimes contrast that with the idea that we have social constructs and we have divine constructs. We have things that God has created that we don't understand. We don't have any idea of what his plans are, what his mission is for us. We just have to have faith and believe that he has our best interests and our paths laid out. So it's really good to be able to contrast that, to say, hey, we're only human. We're flawed. We make errors. We have to change the laws. We have to change what is and what isn't a crime. But God's perfect, and God doesn't have to make those changes, or doesn't make mistakes. So it's really been good to be at a place like Concordia that allows you to tap into that dynamic of man in humanity, and then also the divine constructs and how God sits on his own pedestal in terms of our behaviors. Whereas a lot of other universities, you can't talk about those things. A lot of other universities, your religion and your faith has to be kept in its own compartmental socket and section, and your academic pursuits are your academic pursuits. So that's really been a real blessing in my end, to be able to tap into faith and get into the divine component to tie into the social construction component too. So I'm very blessed to be at a place like Concordia that allows for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, like the contrast you were saying about divine versus social construct of like God has his own plan and we just kind of have to trust that, right? Like we have to have that faith that doesn't make sense at times because sometimes we just don't understand, what's all happening because we don't see the bigger picture that God sees.
Right.
And I think that's
or we
really
try to fit it
cool.
into our social constructs. Like we socially construct
Very
things like,
true.
oh, it should be like this. And God's like, I
Yeah.
can make it be however I want it to be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, but we are so locked into these social constructs that it's sometimes hard for our minds to escape them. Right? We're socialized into them. We're socialized to believe this is right, that's wrong, this is good, that's bad. That it's sometimes difficult to step back and be like, maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't have all the answers. God does, and I have to trust that He's going to lay this out for me, even if I am holding on to things that might be hindering that sometimes.
Yeah. Are there any fears or things that you, when you think about social constructs, are there things or fears that like scare you or drive you away from taking that bigger picture look? Like, are there things that take you away from that bigger picture, and how do you then come back to the bigger picture? And how do you remind yourself that social constructs are different than divine constructs, as you were saying?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. We were talking a little bit before too. So my background is in sociology, but I also have a psych background too. My undergrad, and I have a master's in psych as well. So for a long time, I approached everything from a very micro, individual focused level, but really switching to sociology and getting my PhD in sociology, it forces you to take that step back and look at things at a bigger scale. And it wasn't really until I started to develop that sociological imagination was I able to think about the world in that way. And the weird thing is that in some ways, once that, it's like a lot of things. It's our math. Like once that light switch, the switch is flipped, it's hard to turn off. It's hard to not see the world that way. It's hard to not understand things in that concept once you're internalize it and believe that that's what's kind of the world around you. So yeah, it's really been eye-opening and really impacted how I've taught classes and tried to express ideas across to students to try to get them to expand their minds a little bit and be able to see the world in that way. But it's not easy. I think it's again, we're socialized to kind of see the world one way.
Yes.
And over time, we really internalize that and that becomes part of who we are. I believe this, I hold on to this, and we construct the world in the ways that we want it to be.
Yeah.
It could be dangerous, but it also could be empowering to kind of lift that veil and to be able to take a step back and look at the world in a more macro view.
That's a good point. I think that kind of goes into our theme for the semester that's called Fearless.
Yeah.
So, and the verse of the semester is Joshua 1:9, which I'm going to read right now. It says, "Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous, do not be frightened, do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Just knowing that in general, but also in the field that you work with and things you've seen and things you've taught and learned, how would you say one could overcome that fear? Or maybe not even overcoming the fear, but how do you have courage in the midst of that? You know?
It's interesting because fear in the criminal justice system has a duality that's in some ways problematic.
Yeah.
In one way, one of the biggest things in the criminal justice system is this idea of deterrence. And deterrence works in two ways. One way is a specific deterrence where this idea, and it's not only the criminal justice system, it's in families with anything that involves disciplining. So sports teams, for example, where you have this specific deterrence where if someone does something that you don't want them to do, they violate a law or a rule, they receive a sanction or punishment so that they won't do that behavior again out of fear of that sanction. So the criminal justice system has built in this idea of we have to have fear to keep people from committing crimes. They also have this idea of general deterrence where if you punish someone else, others around them see that, and that creates a fear of, I don't want that to happen to me. Oh, I saw them get their hand chopped off for stealing, I'm not going to steal. So fear is actually built into the criminal justice system as part of that social control to keep people from committing crimes.
Mm-hmm.
The downside of that is that it can then be flipped to say, since fear is part of our foundation, we can use that fear to cause divide and create division within society too. Oftentimes that fear comes in fear of the other, or fears of strangers, fear of those that don't look like you, fear of those that don't believe what you believe. And I think that's the courage that we need to build on and lean into, is trying to overcome those fears of stereotypes, of basic overplaying or overcriminalization of certain people to say, hey, you need to be fearful of them, or you need to be concerned with this group. And I think that takes courage of recognizing sometimes that fear is trumped up or exaggerated a little bit, and understanding that because crimes are social constructs, society can also construct who it wants to criminalize. And historically, it's oftentimes criminalized people who have been marginalized in society. And that same fear is used to say, hey, we're marginalizing and criminalizing these people for a reason, because you should fear them because they're a threat to you in some way. So I think overcoming those fears of others, fears of the unknown, someone that might not look like you, we're afraid of or we're concerned with, is one of the biggest ways that we can try to combat fear that is oftentimes manufactured or portrayed, that might not be what is really happening with our interactions and in society. But that takes a lot of internal
processing,
right? Focus, reflection, right?
True.
That isn't always to do, especially, again, like you said, if you're raised certain ways or to believe things, or if things have been constructed in your life to look a certain way, it might be hard to open up to others, or open up to some ideas that might have been ingrained in you deeply in the past.
Very true. You were mentioning society kind of picking certain people, and it made me think of Jesus whenever, people were just turning on him and everyone was choosing to see him as the bad guy. And even before he went on the cross, like, they were to choose between two people, either Jesus or an actual criminal, and they chose Jesus to put on the cross. And I was just thinking about that. It's just something to point out. But also seeing how in the midst of all of that, I think even Jesus could have felt fear in a way, because he was human, fully human, and God. And I think he also felt all those emotions that we are feeling, and he still leaned into that. He told God, he was honest with God, vulnerable with God. So I don't know, just something to point out there.
But
and
that's a perfect example too of, for Jesus, there weren't strangers. He wasn't like, I don't know if I rock with you, right? He had that open heart, was accepting of others, which then allowed him to embrace others and to say, hey, I'm not going to stereotype or prejudge or have any preconceptions about you. I'm going to look at who you are as a person and judge you on your heart and your spirit and what you're doing for the world. That's a really good example of that idea of overcoming that fear of others by thinking more like, what would Jesus do? How would he approach this person? How would he view this situation? And not necessarily, and like you said, I don't think you'd ever approach others with fear of, I'm afraid of this person, or I'm afraid of this group. So it's a really good example of using Jesus as a role model to overcome that fear.
Thanks. Also, just approaching it from a place of curiosity, I think, changes a lot of perspective for people. If you go, even if it's somewhere new where you've never been before, and you're just like, I'm just curious to know what this is about. You can learn so many things from just being open-minded like that. And I think it's so important for us to do, especially young people out there. It's very scary to do a lot of things right now, and meeting all the different people who don't believe the same things as you do. And even if you move to a different state or different university and stuff, you learn new things, and it can be scary, but leaning into that, okay, what can I learn from this? What's God trying to show me through this? But knowing that too, what's something in your life personally where you felt like you had kind of fear overcome you in a moment, or you felt that fear coming on, and how did you face it? How did you deal with it?
I think transitions are always difficult. Changing cities, changing jobs. I know that when I did my PhD at Texas A&M, so I was at College Station, and that was my first introduction to Texas. And my wife moved down here, and we got married and we started a family. But she's a dentist. Shout out my wife. And so we had to kind of decide, like, what are we going to do? Are we going to try to find a job where I get a professor's position and she moves with me? Is it we establish a dental office and then I try to find a job wherever I can? It was really stressful because it was a real big turning point of, okay, where's our life going? Where's our lives going? Our family going? And I really had to lean into God and be like, I'm trusting you got this. I'm trusting you're going to work this out. You're going to put our family in where we need to be. You're going to put me where I need to be. You're right. And it could maybe look a little funky. It could look unconventional, but I'm going to trust that you're going to overcome these fears that I have about what's going to happen with my family moving forward. And as God does, he worked his magic. He put us in Austin. He put my wife with a practice in Killeen, so not too far. So we're able to maneuver through that. Yeah. But it was fearful. It was just kind of like, what's going to happen next, God? I don't know. I'm trusting that you're going to put me where I need to be. And I think he did. I think that being at Concordia is where I needed to be. And a lot of those fears were, just self-doubts and self-generated fears that God had his plan. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
Right. He was like, don't worry about this. I got you. But I didn't know that, right? That's what we're saying. Like we're flawed. We get in our own heads. We have anxiety. We have doubts about our own capabilities and our own, right? Like, am I worthy of this? So kind of letting those things go and trusting in God, I think was one of the biggest things for me to overcome fear-wise. And it wasn't easy. But that's what, going back to this idea of, I really feel like, focusing on this dynamic of social constructs and divine constructs has also been very humbling, where it's recognizing, hey, I'm just a man. We're all just humans. We're all just flawed creatures, right? And I think that was something that I needed to be instructing in others to really internalize and gain information of and focus on in reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such really a good story. And thank you for sharing, because like, I think that's something that we can all relate to about transitioning and, not having like no fear, because that's almost impossible as humans to not have fear. I mean, in your Jesus example, like he still had fear, and that's okay to still have fear, but being able to, with that fear, being able to just give it all to God and being like, even though I am fearful, I'm going to trust you, God, because I know that somehow you're going to work this out better than I can imagine. And I think that's just such a great example of that, and how God really does make a way out of, nothing and just makes something happen. God's amazing.
And I've been leaning a little bit more into, and this might just be coming with old age, which is but I've leaned a little bit more into that those doubts that it might not be the best, right? Like I don't know what's going to happen next, and it might not be a slam dunk, but even if it's not, it's still God's plan, right? Even if it's, hey, you're going to have to do this for a little while and then we'll do that. Okay, God, I'm trusting you here. So not necessarily always seeing or hoping that the positive is the outcome, right? Understanding that sometimes we're going to have the valleys, sometimes we're going to have those transitions not maybe be so smooth, but not necessarily be afraid of that, but leaning into that, be like, that's part of life, that's part of the process. We tell our girls and the basketball team, if you're shooting 45%, we're thrilled, right? But that means you're missing 55% of your shots, right? So it's more than half the shots you're missing, and we're thrilled, right? We're thrilled with those misses, right? So it's kind of this idea of not being afraid of those misses or those negative aspects of life that are inevitably going to come.
That's so good. Yeah, not being afraid of the misses. Like I grew up playing baseball, and a Hall of Famer in MLB is you are hitting 3 out of every 10 at bats, which means that you're failing 7 out of 10 times. You're failing more than you are succeeding, and that's considered great in the sport. And I think that's a great example of how to bring that into your life of, hey, you are going to fail. You're going to fall flat on your face, and that's okay, because you're going to learn from it and you're going to get better from it. And when you do fail, there's going to be other moments where you're not going to fail, and you can rejoice in both your failures and your successes. And I love that.
That's tough, though. I think that's tough to.
It is.
I mean, it's
so
back to this
hard.
idea of, but I think it's because we hold on to this idea that we can chase this perfection, or we can chase this God image that we can't. We shouldn't be. But I don't. That's not always socialized. We're so like, you need 100 on that exam, right?
Yeah.
That's what we were expecting, but the more I've grown and the more I've kind of experienced life, I've leaned back and leaned off of this idea of perfection and shooting for perfection or expecting perfection. It's just not realistic.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's like Jesus is the only one who's perfect,
Exactly.
and we are to try to be more like him, but he does not require perfection from us because we can't ever be that.
Yeah.
Never. And that's why we need him in our lives.
Yeah,
But also,
definitely.
he talks about discipleship and really just like a question that we ask, our guest is, in your life right now, where you're at, what areas in your life do you feel like you are either making disciples or you're trying to be a better disciple with Jesus or just walking with Christ?
Yeah. Like I said, I really feel blessed to be able to incorporate my faith and my beliefs into the academic side of my life too. Like I said, it was really, I don't want to say difficult, but new to go through a lot of academic training to say, hey, we don't talk about your personal faith in this, and to go for a situation where it's like, okay, now we expect you to talk about your faith. So that's been a transition for me to have to rely on Jesus to be like, okay, you put me here to do this, so I'm trusting that you're going to help me to make that transition and to make that happen a little bit more smoothly. And I do feel like in the 7 years that I've been at Concordia, I have grown in that role a lot. But at the same time, I think that part of my job and part of my role at Concordia is to inform students. And I really embrace that aspect of trying to give them as much information so that they can live their lives, even involving the criminal justice system, as knowledgeable and as faithful as possible. And to be able to see and separate the aspect of the divine and the social constructs, and to be able to say, I see how they operate on their own, and also then be able to prioritize Jesus to say, okay, this social construct could change tomorrow, but if I hold on to Jesus, I'm good. Right? That doesn't change, that doesn't falter, that doesn't judge. And try to get them to see that in that dynamic where usually they're just, if ever talked about separately, right? We focus on Jesus and our love for him in one realm, and we focus on society, criminal justice system, laws in another realm. But to be able to kind of mirror them together and say they're working in contrast or working in concert with each other, I'm hoping that students are going to be able to take that outside of their college lives and to grow on that for sure. The other big thing that I try to express with my students is just knowledge about the law. So our rights, are the constitutional amendments that we have to protect us. And I think that the more students have that knowledge and information, the less fearful they will be of law enforcement, right? If you know your rights, you know what they can and cannot do, you know what your procedures are, you know when you're able to leave. So just giving them as much information and knowledge as possible to be able to maneuver through the world safely, I really feel is an important part of my position and role and calling from Jesus to inform the next generation of how to maneuver through the world.
That's good.
As well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And I will say, as I have taken only one of your classes, and that was freshman year a while ago, you do such a good job of helping us students think beyond just like the classroom and be able to actually really just understand the world better and understand ourselves better, and be able to apply our own beliefs and our own faith or what we believe to our life. And I love all of it. Like I loved your class, and
Nice.
I wish I get to take more of them if I was in your major or had time to take other classes. But yeah, I really appreciate you coming
That's
out
sweet.
here. And
Can I plug 2 classes? that I'm teaching?
yes,
Is
for
that okay?
sure.
Yeah.
In the spring, I'm teaching sociology of sport.
Okay.
And we're focusing on pickup basketball. So we're going around different courts in the city, and we're playing pickup basketball on Monday nights, 6 to 9. So if you're interested, sign up for that. And then right now in the fall and next fall, I'm teaching criminology, and we're using Grand Theft Auto, and we're playing in the esports arena. So
That's cool.
the kids in the class are detectives, and we have crimes set up in the game, and they have to solve the crimes and come up with criminological theories. So that's a cross-listed class with criminal justice and sociology. So if you have intro to sociology or intro to criminal justice, you have that prereq. So look for that next fall.
Okay, there you have it, guys.
Can I go back to class? I want to take that class. That sounds so much.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And just so much knowledge to be imparted too.
Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much.
Me. I really appreciate it.
If you guys have any other questions, feel free to reach out to him at email.
bruce.reese@concordia.edu.
Exactly. Yes. And check out those courses and your prerequisites and stuff. And just thank you for listening, guys. We appreciate you spending the time to just hear all about this. And we hope you got something out of it. See you in the next episode with another guest. You'll find out who later.
Yeah, we will.